Hello, everybody, again to our next second part of the trilogy, the three-part webinar series we decided with our partners to host. And hello from my homemade makeshift little studio here in the Netherlands in Haarlem. And I welcome you all. We had fantastic response about 10 days ago with more than 300 people online. And we want to keep up the good energy and vibes to see what we can actually do in this crisis to take the right steps forward. And the topic today was mentioned by many of the listeners in the last webinar we hosted. You really want to know what's the impact also on emerging economies and what is the potential impact around international supply chains. We will again take about 45 minutes at a high pace, so we get a lot of content covered. And I'm really happy that we have again partners like Connected Circles, the Circular Futures, the African Circular Economy Network, the Circular Economy Club, Renewable Matters, and also Circular Conversation as partners, so we reach as many people all over the world as possible. I would encourage all of you to please mention your question on Instagram, on LinkedIn, or on Twitter and post them so we can get to them. Maybe in your comments also say where you're coming from so we actually know where you're dialing in from and where the interest comes. The last days were again full of interesting news about governments, businesses, talking about their plans on how to potentially build back better. And obviously, many of us have seen also the news coming out about the World Overshoot Day just over the last weekend, mentioning on how, when a country or when has the world actually reached a point of time in a year when more resources are used than can be regenerated by the earth. And this hasn't been yet published what the global figure is, but for example, on Holland, we have the 3rd of May now when we have the World Overshoot Day. And I also wrote down, because one of our partners and guests in the chat will be today from Chile. Chile has the 18th of May. And so I want to introduce my fellow panelists, so to say. This is on the one hand, Bezawit Eshetu from Ethiopia. She's an environmental engineer, a member of the African Circular Economy Network, and also an international advisor on circular economy. Welcome, Bezawit. I think you're dialing in from Addis Ababa today.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. And then Petar Ostojic from Chile. He has been a circular entrepreneur and has pushing the agenda with the government and businesses very strongly in South America, particularly in Chile. He's not only an entrepreneur showing that business cases that are circular can work, but is also a co-founder for the Center for Innovation and Circular Economy that will pick up speed now in the next months. Welcome also, Petar.
Thank you, Harold. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. And also a special guest was able to join my good friend Nilgün Tas, who is from Turkey herself, but at the moment working from Vienna, that is working and the Deputy Director for Environment for the UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organizations. Welcome, Nilgün.
Greetings to you all. Nice.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I want to dive right into the topic. Bezawit, we had an interesting conversation before this. Maybe you want to share from a circular economy perspective in emerging economies, such where you see it in Africa. What can the way forward be? There's now a focus on recycling rather than designing, but you are seeing very clear barriers and potential accelerators. What are the good things that are maybe triggered by the presence of the current COVID crisis? Bezawit, over to you.
Yes. Well, thank you. Well, obviously, a lot can be said about the negative impacts of COVID, but good things are also coming out of this pandemic, which is attacking the whole country, as I could say, in fear and uncertainty. The most important one and the most interesting highlight was the shift to digital innovation approach that businesses and even individuals are taking upon. It could be e-payments, or it could be online applications to be used to order food, supermarkets, and other things. So those are the good things that are actually coming out of this COVID currently in Ethiopia.
We can't hear you, Harold.
Thank you, Peter.
There you
Peter,
go.
over to you now. My question to you, how can the current situation be used really as an opportunity in Chile and also South America to bring together the fourth industrial technological revolution with a building back better approach? And how can the circular economy make sure that the local economies can jumpstart such a green growth environment?
Well, the coronavirus crisis showed that we were over dependent of the global supply chain. We suffered a huge deindustrialization process for the last 40 years. So this moment is perfect in order to create a new business model promoted by the circular economy, but also to integrate Industry 4.0 technologies. So we see this as an opportunity, as a second wave to reindustrialize 4.0 Latin America. Can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Any examples you can mention that makes this very concrete for our listeners? What are the opportunities?
Sure. We have different productive industries in Latin America that right now cannot get some vital products. So a lot of entrepreneurs that are manufacturing and producing these high value products are right now having a great business opportunity in order to manufacture everything local. We have from the mining industry, from the and some other industrial activities that are really creating not only sustainable growth, but also creating high value employment.
Thank you very much. I would like to go into remind all the listeners, and we have now here on the chat more than 100 people signed up, and many are watching on YouTube. We have posted in the chat requests for you to fill in a Slido feedback questionnaire, because I was really interested, and many people got to me in the last days and asked, please ask a couple of questions to the people, the audience. And one is about how hopeful are you for the post-COVID-19 recovery? The other question that we are posing is, how much do you see the world potentially changing after the crisis is over? And the third question, an important one that many of us are getting into, is, will the COVID-19 crisis increase inequality in the world? Please take some time as you're listening to answer the question. We want to bring them back in about half an hour to also share with all what it is about. I want to give you now a quick overview from my point of view before we go to Nilgun about, you share the, please, technical support, can you share the slides? What a circular economy actually mean for emerging economies. And in my work in the last years on circular economy strategies, I was very busy in also explaining how these two can come together. And on the one hand, so the first slide you are seeing is that there is a very clear, next slide, interlinkage between the SDGs on the one hand, which you see are the colorful examples, and what circular economy can bring as strategies. And when you overlay the two, you see that 75% of the SDGs can truly be tackled with circular economy approaches. We also should keep this in mind, because the SDGs provide a very powerful framework for building back better. Next slide, please. And when you look at this concretely, there was a lot of work being done. Circular Economy, the organization I've been working with before, together with UNDP, has done this work on Laos. And we looked at very concrete examples on how you can build back better, how you can make green growth happen. And we looked into the different areas of tourism, but also agriculture and energy. And some of examples that we came up with, why don't you use, for example, the hydrogen power that you have to in the lakes that the water industry is providing? Can you grow biological fertilizer there? Next one, please. Or in the tourism sector, can you use different building materials? And an example I like very much from Ghana is, there is an example of a large-scale automotive remanufacturing center called Kumasi that showed very clearly that the circular economy provides many opportunities in emerging economies. And the next slide, please. And when you overlay this, next one, please. Yeah, now we are finished with the presentation that I wanted to give you, and I'm happy to provide in the later on in the chat also more examples. There's a high interlinkage also to build very good employment and sustainable employment, which will be a very important factor for organizations such as the UN to engage in circular economy strategies. And I think that's why I want to hand over to Nilgun. Nilgun, in your many years of work with the UN environment, in the UN environment, and particularly with UNIDO, what do you see now, the current crisis affecting the green growth opportunities in countries, and maybe also a reflection how you see this work relevant for international supply chains?
Thank you, Harold. Greetings again. The supply chains clearly have broken. We have reached out to a large number of companies in North America, North Africa, South America, Asia, and we continue to reach out to them due to the reduction in exports, for example, from China, the manufacturing hub of for all manufacturing industries around the world. There has been, production has stopped virtually in other places because they could not source raw materials, parts and components, and machinery. On the other hand, there has been the crisis in the garment industry. For example, in Bangladesh, a lot of buyers, large buyers, have canceled their contracts, some of which have already been produced. They have just decided no consumer demand here, nobody is buying. So there has been both a demand and a supply side breakage of the supply chains.
Can you give a concrete example also how this affects, for example, what you see in your work in South America or in Africa?
Well, in Jordan, for example, the Mediterranean paint producer, one of our partners, a paint producing company, could not source materials from China, so they cannot produce paint. So they have stopped. But also domestic markets, the demand has dried up because what is happening is that in most countries there are lockdowns, production has been reduced to 20-25% levels all around the world, in fact, except for some personal protective equipment, medical instruments, and so on. Food chains are usually operational, and basic necessities like toilet paper, as we know, those are going over the borders mostly. But what is the solution, right? This is something that nobody has seen before, not in our lifetimes of the 105 participants. I hope we don't see it again as well, neither the next generations. But recovery has to be green. When we recover, we have seen, clean air, we can breathe better, water is clear, birds are singing. I can hear the frogs now when I go out to walk. I could not hear them before. So we have the opportunity, and as the UN and as UNIDO, we strongly promote the comeback to be green. We promote green industry development, and the basis of circular economy, circular products, is circular manufacturing operations, because they also decide on the design of the product, whether it is easier to recycle or remanufacture and whatnot. So this is an opportunity. We are going to go back to normal, because we eat already, we will continue to feed ourselves. We need clothing, we need shoes, and not everything can be produced at home when there is all this established capacity around the world. So slowly, the supply chains will come back. One critical issue is what we are concerned with is the demand side. If too many small enterprises, micro enterprises, self-employed people continue to be unemployed for a long extended period of time, this is going to impact on the demand in all kinds of countries, from developed to developing countries, particularly the developing countries.
Thank you, Nilgün.
Yeah.
I wanna get now. I know because you're a wealth of knowledge and it's such a topic that makes us all excited. I would like to quickly go to Bezavit and say, when you hear the international community, and I think many people talk about green growth and building back better, what is the effect of this disruption on international supply chains on a country also like yours, and maybe what are the opportunities?
Well, so far, the biggest sector which was affected was the transport sector, especially the Ethiopian Airlines, because transportation was totally cut down and employees were dispersed. But then they came up with new innovative ways of making sure that the airlines is still floating by changing their way of service. Instead of taking people, they started taking cargoes, which was an innovative way of trying to adapt and cope with the new way. And then flour factories were also affected. These ones tried to change the things that they were producing into something which is edible within the country, another way of coping. And local, within the continent of Africa, also transportation service was also low. So the airlines started serving other fellow African airlines, which was also another way of coping. So these kind of things were introduced and are still going to be introduced in now or in the future, which are honestly innovative in one way or another. And the same thing with supermarkets, as I've mentioned. Now you can order things on online app, which was not there, and I think that is the new order that we're going in that direction. Things are supposed to be done in a less human-to-human contact, I could say, and then a lot of social distancing, but still in an innovative way because we still have to survive anyways. Those are the things that are the country, the businesses, and even individuals are trying to incorporate to maintain some sanity to the disrupted value chain, both within Ethiopia and, of course, abroad, because most of the export goes to the other end. Import is another problem because we used to import a lot of raw materials from China, and well, China is the first target of this pandemic, and that created us to shift to other more expensive and difficult to access markets to import those raw materials, and that is indirectly affecting also our manufacturing sector. But those are the small things that we're tweaking here and there to manage and make sure that the supply chain is maintained.
A short follow-up question, Bezavit. Do you also see some hope for the emergence of some local circular economies now that could maybe have a positive impact on employment as well?
Yes. The first thing the government of Ethiopia did when this kind of COVID thing came into the picture almost 2 months ago is make sure that the small and medium enterprises are not sinking. No, they float with the support of amount of money which is supported, injected by the government. And they were supposed to come up with solutions which doesn't produce waste, because we can't afford to lose waste when there is resource scarcity. And a lot of people are, that's the first one, and the second one is a lot of use, and a lot of people are now at home, and there's more time to explore ideas and come up with solutions, which were uh, the idea of extended resources is now minimized. So there was I could say, a forced need to make sure that circular approach of recycling, reusing materials, changing to apps, and co-working spaces are emerging into the picture. So those are the new norms in that country, I could say.
Thank you very much. I have a question coming in from Michael Rada, and I want to put a link here to Peter, because the comment was, he says, do you know that the Industrial Revolution, the fourth Industrial Revolution, actually is behind the damage of the environment? So now he says this is actually negatively affecting what we are seeing. And do we support more the damage that is being done for the future? Or is this an opportunity technology, I think, that we build back better? How do you reconcile the two, Peter, in your example in Chile?
Well, I do not agree that the fourth industrial revolution creates deepens the damage. I think it's great part of the solution when you combine it with the circular economy. We always say this, that we cannot talk about circular economy without mentioning the fourth industrial revolution. Those are two faces of the same coin, which allow you to use the resources more efficiently, allow you to transition to a products as a service business model, and allow you to create more and high quality jobs. And I think part of the solution right now, and what we've seen with this pandemic, is that we need to make a cultural shift. We need to move from globalization to localization. I think the crisis has shown us that there's a huge opportunity for new entrepreneurs, for new industrialists, that I would like to call, that can still think globally, but should act locally. I think we have a great opportunity to transform territories, especially in Latin America and Africa. That are two of the cases that we are discussing today. In fact, we have this South and South relationship, but because we are a special part of the planet, we are full of high value resources, but we don't create high value products. And at the same time, if we want to move towards a circular economy, we want to decouple the economy from the use of natural resources. So it's a great opportunity for us. And I think the movement was going in that direction, but the crisis of the coronavirus accelerated everything. And right now we have to face this huge threat, but also opportunity in the next months, in the next years. So I'm really positive about that, and I see again circular economy and the Industry 4.0 as big parts of the solution.
I think Michael and Rada, and online there's some emerging talk, or more and more talk, about Industry 5.0. So the closer collaboration between man and machine. I think you are very clearly also focused on innovation as an entrepreneur, Peter. A follow-up question: can you make it very concrete how the industrialization 5.0 in a country like Chile that is so strong on natural resources and so rich, and doesn't want to get into the resource curse on using the resources and just exporting them, but actually building strong local high value generating economies? Can you give a clear example for our listeners on how you see this as an opportunity now for the next years?
Absolutely. Chile is one of the #1 countries with solar radiation. So we have a huge potential of clean energy here in the north of Chile. In fact, I'm here in the Atacama Desert. So we will need a lot of technologies that will require these strategic resources that we produce in Latin America, specifically talking about copper and lithium. So we need to stop just being the producers of these resources, and we need to create the technologies in order to create the new green economy locally and then globally.
Okay, thank you very much. I know this is a very hot topic, because now, in a way, many resources and decisions are taken that will have an impact for the next years. And I want to go over to Nilgun again, because there came a follow-up question. And I know, Nilgun, you are busy with international projects looking at this. And the question was from Pavel, asking, can circular economy be part of the solution to increase the resilience of local economies? Do you believe that? And obviously, if so, why? With an example would be the strongest. Nilgun, please.
Absolutely. We believe in that very much, because the less, that is why I talked about the clean air and the clear waters and the birds and the frogs. The less we take out of nature, the more we preserve nature, meaning resources, the better off we will be. One of the sectors, of course, is the construction sector at the top of that agenda, but followed closely by agriculture and what we take from the land and what we put into the land. So we are firm believers that resilience can be built with circular economy practices. We recommend to call them practices as UNIDO, because of the industrial uptake that needs to happen of circular economy approaches or practices. Yeah, certainly. Just one thing, if I may go back to what Peter says. One experience we had in communicating with our developing country partners was their access and the reliability of internet. Sitting in Europe, sitting in middle income countries, we have internet. I mean, I'm sitting in Vienna. I come from Turkey. Turkey is one of the most linked countries, despite its lower level of income per capita. But, not everybody is like that. So we have to find ways also of reducing the digital divide before we can really talk about big data, artificial intelligence, robots, automation, and so on. But there are, of course, in Industry 4.0, lower level technologies that could also be implemented. So
yeah, maybe Peter wants to respond to that, because I like obviously the interaction between all three of you spanning the globe in terms of the experience. I guess Peter makes the point also that we need a very strong local economy, or for example, on telecom and data. But Peter, you can speak better for yourself, maybe to Nilgun's point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why it's for us. It's really important to show that circular economy. It's the other face of Industry 4.0. I mean, if you separate them, maybe you can see the risks that some of the participants are saying. But I think the mixture of the both is the great opportunity. And the only way to create strong local new companies is what we've seen as entrepreneurs is through Industry 4.0. I mean, for example, my own company, we started using 3D printing 20 years ago. They were $500,000, one 3D printer. Right now, you can get one of the biggest one in the world for 35,000 euros. So the democratization of Industry 4.0 in order to create new high value companies with the circular economy business model, it's the biggest opportunity we have right now. And the coronavirus crisis has shown us that you can create new small and medium-sized companies that can create high-value products in a circular way. And the great opportunity also for our regions is that you necessarily need to digitalize your services and products. So I think it's once in a lifetime opportunity. And in terms of the questions that I'm seeing that the waste generation that you can create an industry 4.0, I've seen absolutely the opposite. I mean, I've seen huge high value products in Latin America that were previously thrown away, that right now with all this technology, we can increase the lifetime and reduce the waste generation. And at the same time, creating high valuable new jobs.
Peter, follow-up question. What are the three biggest hurdles you see to make that shift quickly?
I think it's a mindset in Latin America, maybe in Africa also. We have a rent-seeking mindset, and I think that's the most difficult part to change, because manufacturing is hard, technology is hard, but it's a great opportunity in the long term.
I think the question of reindustrialization in a healthy way is not only relevant, obviously, for South America or Africa. It's certainly a question that we're going to have also in Europe very strongly being put forward. I want to go from the data and the tech side a little bit again to local questions. There's a question coming in from Federico, and it's to you, Bezovit, because obviously Africa is a very active, interactive society, and we see now everywhere many issues in the food and beverage, in the gastronomy sector. Do you see, because of the breakdown of social distance or the social distancing issue, do you see more innovation coming in the gastronomy sector that you could point us to, and this may be done in a different way, in a sustainable and circular way? Could you point out one or two examples? You were a bit alluding to this before already. Bezovit, please.
Well, I'm not sure if it really fits into the circular economy concept, but for the very basic reason that a lot of food waste happens at the agricultural farmlands. It's not more on the at the table. Not so much food is lost at the table. A good majority of the projects, in my view, focusing on circular economy should be based or should be geared towards agricultural post-harvest lost schemes. And a lot of them are composting, but composting comes from the food which is already at the farm, like the husk and the other agricultural fibers and all are composted, and the solid waste which is collected from the city, which is mostly organic, also ends up in the composting sector. That could possibly end up or not end up considered as circular economy. And as far as the other end where consumers are considered, again, I go back to the same example where apps are used to order more food so that more food is not lost on the table. And the transportation and obviously the carbon footprint which is used to produce the food in the factories is also reduced. Those are the things which are happening at the processing and at the consumer level. But on the other end, a good majority of circular economy projects are focused on the agricultural wastes on the farm. That's what I can say.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to share the results of the survey that we have put out. It was about, the first question was about how much will the world change on a scale from 1 to 10 after the COVID crisis. And here are the respondents, or most of the respondents. I hope you all see the results right now, with a grade from 1 to 10 was rated 7. So a third of the people are very hopeful that the world will change. If we assume that we have been living now in a world that has been facing social, environmental, and economic crises. So I think that is a very good indication, because a lot of fear at the moment is being induced all over the world because of the different things that are happening. And I want to show you the second result as well, which shows that how hopeful. Now the next one, please. Are you the next one. Are you hopeful for the post-COVID-19 recovery? And again, the people say, yes, they are hopeful. And I like this very much. Last and third question was about, do you think, thank you for the presentation, we can stop it now. The third one was, do you think that social inequality will be on the rise? And there was nearly an unanimous yes. We think the social inequality will rise. And I want to bring this a bit back to Nilgun, because many economists have been saying now the real crisis is going to follow the next wave. It's not the health crisis, but it's unemployment on the rise. Any recommendation, Nilgun, you from your international experience with the UN could give at the moment to governments and saying, true, people are afraid that this is going to increase social inequality, and this would be a recommendation how to react to this in the best way. How do you see that in maybe a pointed answer?
Clearly, there are already, and there will be more people unemployed globally, and we have a challenge here. The Western, the European governments, the US, the governments that have some means have launched unemployment support programs for the people, but also for the small and medium enterprises. Similar actions would have to be taken either by reductions in tax, postponement of debt payments, possibly supported by governments, also in developing countries. Because cash, people are using their cash now, have used some of their cash, businesses, I mean, they've used some of their cash. Individuals who have little savings in the less developed countries have been going through their own cash. So people need money to survive and to come back into the working world. So this is a big concern. UN has made a call for support to developing countries in this respect, and we are hoping there would be some funding going in, because demand everywhere in the world will help everyone else. Those that are also selling to, whether it's a raw material or products to the developing world. Manufacturing is interlinked. If we can get it up and running again with some demand side measures, we are confident the jobs will start coming back as well.
Can't hear you, Harold.
Thank you, Peter. I want to hand over again to Bezavit and look at the African contexts. So if we hope that there will be local economies strengthened now as follow-up, do you see inequality on the rise, Bezavit, in the context of that you are observing, or do you think this is not an issue?
No, I strongly think there will be a rise in between in the equality. The reason being, according to recent estimations made by the government, there's already almost 2 million people on safety net supported by the government and developing partners. And then an additional 3 million jobs will be lost from tourism, manufacturing sector, hospitality, catering, all those small jobs which were really floating are now going to be lost, because Addis being the biggest capital of the country, a good majority of workers come from the rural parts of the country, and they will have to go back home, and where things are not going to be also favorable for them on the other end, because it's the same story also there, except that the farming sector is not yet affected by this. However, initiatives like what Nilgun has said, government has now exempted tax for those small and medium enterprises which were working in the cities. And then there's also a grace period for interest exemption for also these small markets, because they will have to pay rent to make sure that their job is still there when this COVID thing is over. And until that better day comes, the government has to make sure that those people have not disrupted their means of income, because there will be an additional strain on the existing economic gap of the country. Uh, and then there's a support also for the manufacturing sector. Obviously, import and export is affected, but whatever is exported with the, sorry, whatever is imported using dollars is now given priority, as long as it makes sure that the export is also equally sustained. Those are the things which are given priority. Luxury items are now supported, are now substituted with basic needs and necessities, including the simple sanitary materials and even masks and hand sanitizers are now given priority over the other not so essential goods and services in lieu of the existence of COVID. So those are the small things that are happening to narrow the gap of inequality. But in general, I would say this would take like 4 to 5 to 6 months in minimum to make sure that the gap is lower. And another simple example is education. Is now all the schools and universities are closed because the social distancing need. But the thing is, those classes are now ending up given on internet and on TVs and national things, which are not really necessary. It's a luxury thing for some of the communities to have internet. So those things have already created a gap between the society. So in order to lower that, things are now modified to be given into radios and other mediums which are easily accessible for a mass of the society. So yes, the gap will be there. It's still here, and I think it will be there for the next 4 to 5 months. But small solutions and innovations are in place as much as possible to make sure that the gap is reduced.
Alex online also asked the question, do you see low tech as an important opportunity? It doesn't need always to be high tech, but low tech. Can you give an example maybe how you see that?
Yes. For example, internet is improving. Internet access to internet is improving in general in the country. The telecom companies are doing their best to make sure that it is accessible, affordable to the mass. But still, it is not as much as it is expected or required or even needed by the society. So the more high tech we go, the higher the gap would be. So solutions should be more focused on low tech and something which is accommodative and inclusive of the mass. Yes, so I would favor something in between, not very high tech and not very low tech. Because if it is really low tech, then we will have to compete with the rest of the world where we can't fit in. That's what I think.
Maybe realistic tech and think that works is important, however we qualify.
Yes.
And I am so grateful that really you all take time, because it's a topic that is very dear to my heart, as I've been spending the last 5 years before moving back to Europe in Thailand and Myanmar to see what can be really sustainable solutions there. And I know how difficult the answer is and how much locally it's driven, and that Chile can learn from Ethiopia, can learn from Turkey, that we all can learn from what's happening in Europe or in Asia, and really make this a big global learning exercise. And Petter, you mentioned this before as well in our prep talk, that the South-South collaboration between emerging economies will be an important one. And I want to tie it into a question that came in from Celine, asking if circular economy can be the way forward, maybe to catch up from emerging economies towards developed countries. Is the COVID-19 crisis an obstacle, or do you see it more as an accelerator at the moment?
I see the COVID-19 as the turbo, as the accelerator of this process that, in my view, was inevitable. And it's a great question, because I think the circular economy for Africa and Latin America, it's an opportunity of leapfrogging. Uh, we can continue the recycling economy that we know, which is the ceiling, because we have all the data from Europe, for example, from North America, or we can leapfrog directly from the linear economy to the circular economy. And when you see the data, it's really interesting, because, for example, in Europe, you have a rate of 60% recycling. In Latin America, it's around 9%, 10%. So you can just imagine if what is the business opportunity, just in order to increase the recycling rate from 10 to 40, 50, 60%. And in top of that, if you add the opportunity of creating new industry 4.0 under a circular economy business model, you can not only create sustainable economic growth, but as an international labor organization recent report said, you can create, just in Latin America, up to 6 million new jobs. So it's a win-win situation for us. Right now, we need to focus on this sad crisis, but the silver lining is that we have a great opportunity to leapfrog in Latin America, and I think as well in Africa.
Thank you very much. As I promised, I'm a good timekeeper, and I know that people have been very patiently online. I see it with myself how much more engagement also internationally I was able to do with Zoom calls, for example, in different international conferences. We all miss on the social part and obviously the interactive part, linking with human beings. But I think also knowledge exchange, this has been a big transformational part. And I want to ask one more question to each of you, and thank you so much already of being there. And thanks so much to all the people online. We've seen a spike in questions coming in when it was also about social inequality and how the driver of COVID can be. And Peter, I totally agree. It was a huge driver, and it is a huge driver for digitization and changing also behavior, what we are seeing right now. And Nilgun, I want to point back to you. And Anna Vergara asks, even if South America or Africa start to produce circular rich products, how can companies be more pushed or more convinced to operate with circular business models? Something we have been discussing about a lot in the past. Maybe your recent thinking on that, please.
Yes, no, I'm sorry, I'm afraid it's not so recent. Our thinking about resource efficiency goes back decades. And companies who understand, I think one of the problems that the companies don't understand now, because circular economy is a relatively new concept. Are you saying something, Harold?
No, I'm nodding. I agree.
It's a relatively new concept. When we call it resource efficiency, and cover from raw materials to design to production to recycling, the end of the cycle, or reusing in the between, which we did as UNIDO, then it's immediately understood by businesses, because being resource efficient is also being more productive. Being more productive is affecting your bottom line positively. So we have thousands of examples, even now in our little survey, which we will expand. We asked our clients, are you operating? Yes. Are you still implementing measures to reduce your use of water and this and that? They still are, because it makes business sense. So we have to explain to the business sector that circular economy is not a humongous concept like economy, far removed from the business reality on the ground every day, but that it can save costs, it can provide better jobs for their people, and it can also be, they can also enjoy being compliant and better with respect to their environmental footprint. So the economy, not the circularity, but the end, the economy, I think, sounds a bit far removed from the business reality. That is why we say circular economy practices that businesses can implement. It's not about recycling.
Absolutely.
No, it's about preventing waste from the beginning. But this is an age-old idea. It is an age-old idea that was articulated in 1992 in Rio, right? It's not new.
That makes us all depressed that we haven't come very far on this journey yet, Nilgun.
But this crisis is going to help us push the idea to the minds and practices of everyone, including the consumers.
To the minds and hearts, hopefully. And I like that you mentioned the word practice. For me, practice is also practical. I want to give a last question also to Bezavit, because it's a combination of several questions that come in, also from Katrin. You know, recycling, and Nilgun just mentioned the issue with recycling. We know we all have to recycle, that's clear, as one important part of a circular economy, but can't be the sole focus, nor the primary focus. If you want to shift the system, we have to look into redesigning supply chains and economies and business models. Maybe Bezavit, can you inform us from your perspective?
And products.
And product, thank you. Can you, and also tying it up with new consumer behavior and make this interesting, Bezavit, what are you pushing for locally? Can you give us a bit of flavor in this space of, okay, recycling rates have to go up, that's clear. The whole informal sector is very important in many African countries. Design plays an important role. What are your 2-3 most important points and recommendations to decision makers now in your context that have to be pursued?
Well, my first and foremost recommendation would be to encourage and support innovation hubs where inspirations and entrepreneurship mindsets are changed. That's where you incubate the ideas for circularity or even green growth or even sustainability, which are really the backbone of resilience of the community at the end of the day. So I would push, and I am currently also pushing for that kind of platform or a medium where the youth or even entrepreneurs are encouraged and given the opportunity to explore their ideas. And second and most important one is financing schemes. The good idea, the more good idea you have, it is good. But at the end of the day, there should be something that should be running the whole thing for the business model to work. You'll have to come up with startup money. And for me, that one is in the hands of designing financing schemes. By financing schemes, I mean, for example, the common understanding or the expectation is that there's a lot of solar power in Africa, which is true. But if you go and talk to an investor in one of the industry parks, which are really booming these days, he would make the cost-benefit analysis Nulvin has just explained to us, just like any other business person. And it is not a very difficult concept for him to understand that it is much better to use the national grid than invest on the very expensive solar panels for his factory. Yeah. So his immediate expectation is someone to absorb that shock, that investment capital which is needed, and a kind of arrangement or a kind of financing scheme which will support this kind of ventures is something that I'm also pushing, because this also comes with its own added value that people on the other end of the continent would pay for a premium price, where efforts are made to make sure that these products are sustainably produced, whether circular, green economy, or even environmental management systems incorporated. So that's the second thing I'm pushing. The second, the third one which I honestly think should be the umbrella one, is the policy and legislative frameworks, which is already in the country. As much as possible, the more focus these days, the current development direction the country is taking is to make sure that the private sector development is encouraged over the public sector development, because the money always comes from the other end. But the enabling environments are not there yet. A very simple example, there is no e-payment system in Ethiopia. You can't pay things outside Ethiopia, and the foreign currency is another issue. But this simple thing that you just click on your internet, on your phone, or on your PC to pay for an e-payment to buy things from abroad is not yet in place. So those are the kinds of enabling environments that I'm trying to create awareness, advocate, and try to make sure that the decision makers, the ultimate power lies in their hands anyway. So are in favor of these kinds of arrangements. Those are the three kinds of things that I'm really pushing forward.
Thank you, Bezabit, for the clear and focused answer. And Peter, I have so many more questions, as I know you also are pushing this very hard and have become a leading voice in South America. I really want to leave it a bit up to you. What are your final thoughts, to be honest, because I think you have some, and maybe reflect a little bit. What would you wish for from Nilgun, from international development perspective, and maybe from a fellow entrepreneur in Africa? Just a short impetus to maybe your final words.
Sure, I completely agree of what Nilgun said. I think we, as entrepreneurs, new industrialists, and business people, we need to be clear that the circular economy is a huge business opportunity. And that's the main difference from the previous movements that I've seen. And we are one of the examples that since day one, we started with a circular business model. We've increased our revenues, we've created more jobs, we've reduced waste. So the great thing about the circular economy is that it's absolutely traceable. I mean, if you say that your business is circular, you have to take the roof out of your process and show it. And that's and the second opportunity is that in order to be traceable, you need to incorporate technology. So that's why we say circular economy is the same, or is this the other side of the industry 4.0? So I think as entrepreneurs, we have a great opportunity to show other business people that this is a win-win situation, and that you can finally create the triple benefit, economic, social, and environment all around the world.
Thank you very much. I want to close a couple of minutes before the hour, because I know many people are going out to have their next conferences and do a click and are doing continued work. I want to thank all of you out there, the hundreds who have been now following on YouTube, but also here on Zoom, for asking your questions, for doing every day your good work. Also applause from my side for all the work that has been going into this. Thanks again for the partners, Connected Circles, Circular Future, Circular Economy Club, Africa Circular Economy Network, Renewable Matters, and Circular Conversation for the support. Please, if you want to also make sure we're going to all globally work more together towards solutions, please join. I liked very much our practical focus from Peter, Bezavit, and Nilgun. Thank you very much to the panel. I appreciate very much you took time and prepared for this and took time in your busy schedules to do so. With everybody here, I think we continue to be totally committed to come up with practical solutions, to live this concept that Nilgun said is not anything new, but then let's please make it happen, and let's go into action with our hearts, minds, hands. And I certainly stay committed to be as practical and as clear as possible. And I thank you again for all your suggestions. And I'll revert to you with the last suggestion for a topic for the third part of this webinar series, again, when I analyzed all the questions that come in from all of you, because I want to prioritize where the biggest demand for discussion really is. I very, very much appreciate this global discussion we had today. Thank you all very much, and have a still good day and a good weekend. And stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.